Let's start off with a little survey. By show of hands, how many grandparents are there in the audience?
You tell me our age.
Okay, boy, I hope you connect with this. You probably remember babysitting for a 2-year-old grandchild who is not yet potty trained and who is not very communicative. Well, that's a lot like
You're talking about your bait fish now, right?
Those 2-year-old grandchildren are a lot like catching and keeping live bait. At times, you know, those little kids are frustrating, but more often than not, they're a bundle of joy. And that's why you keep doing it and doing it. Well, that's a little bit like catching and keeping live bait. A little personal history. I was an utter failure for the first 2 years that I striper fished, trying to use artificial bait. Utter failure. And Joel, I tried to listen to your tips, but they never seemed to work for me. So I observed that almost all the guides used live bait. So I decided that I would buy a cast net and I would attempt to learn how to throw it for live bait. And after many failures, I began to have some moderate success. John, if you pull up the first.
How long did it take? I'm at that stage right now.
Well, it depends. Do you mean consistently throw nice round circles or just occasionally?
Consistently and be able to catch bait.
Okay, well, those are sometimes two different things. It probably took me several months. So keep trying, you get it. In any event, yeah, it's not a perfect pancake, but at least it's not a taco. And in April, May, early June, I can catch bait under my dock light. I only have 12 feet of water, so as soon as the water begins to warm up, I don't have any bait. And then I have to go throw off my boat at someone else's dock, and there are certain hazards in doing that. But as you will learn, as you throw your net better and catching them is only the start. The real challenge is keeping them alive after you catch them. They just don't tolerate stress very well, and being caught in somebody's net is the most stressful event that I can think of in the life of a fish. Keeping them alive long enough to go fishing the next day, the next morning,
That's a trick.
is a real challenge. But I did learn to catch bait. I was too frugal, some would say cheap, to go out and buy a $700 super bait tank tube or whatever the current model is. So I started to look at options. John, if you pull up the next slide. You know, what options did I have for keeping my bait once I caught it? And this works. Now, if you don't like that color, then you can go to the next one, and if your wife says, give me magenta, then you can have magenta. But, you know, those are very short term. And even if you put a little pump in there, it's still short term, because there's no filter, and it's just really short term. So, next slide. Oh, wait a minute, how did that one get in? This is
something has popped up on your calendar.
ice
you go fishing.
This
Yeah, that's what it
is,
is.
ice fishing for southerners. Minus the ice and minus the striker, this is another short-term, way to keep your bait alive, but I mean really short-term. Okay, ultimately, I designed and I built 4 prototypes. We call them prototypes when you screw up on 1, 2, 3. But prototype number 4 worked fairly well in terms of a bait tank to use on my boat. And go to the next slide and I'll show you what that looks like. I used that's a 20-gallon. I also made one with a 30-gallon garbage can with a little 12-volt motor. And this has a Danco Venturi to put some air in there. And that works, frankly, really well for half day. On hot days, you do have to put ice jugs in there. It has pumps water up there to create a turning action. So I think I spent maybe $110 on that. So I figured I came out ahead, although because I had to make 4 of them. The filter on the next slide is just a homemade filter. It's a little shower caddy from Bed Bath and Beyond, if they still exist. I used to use pillow stuffing, whatever that's called, fiber fill, and that worked fine. Now I use furnace filter because I can reuse it over and over and over and over again. And I understand that they now make this with a layer of activated charcoal embedded in it. It would probably cost a little more, but as I'll mention later tonight, activated charcoal really helps with water clarity.
Where do you get your filter material?
Amazon.
Okay.
I think Lowe's may also sell it. This came in a big roll, and I cut off big pieces for my big bait tank and little pieces, so it's flexible in that regard, and it acts as a good physical filter. Scales, poop, and then just take it out, and take your hose, rinse it out, and reuse it several times. Anyway, I still use my homemade bait tank on the boat, and I like it because it's light enough that when I empty it, I can take it off the boat, and then my wife can be happy that we have a cruising boat instead of a fishing boat. As I have aged, and Mike, you probably remember when I was a young guy just a few years ago, but as I've aged in recent years, I have gotten increasingly frustrated and frankly lazy about the whole notion of getting up really early every morning to go catch bait each and every time that I want to go fishing. And the uncertainty of, am I gonna get some? I threw a perfect pancake, but it still came up empty. Well, that uncertainty sometimes results in having to call the guy you were gonna take fishing, Scott, for instance, or Walter, and say, I'm sorry, I don't have any bait, so we're gonna have to postpone. So that feeling of uncertainty and the effort involved in catching bait each and every time you want to go fishing got me sort of thinking, and finally the holy grail of laziness and functionality came to me probably in a dream, that if I could only figure out a way to catch a lot of bait and then keep it alive, keep it frisky, make it last, so I could get maybe 2 or 3 fishing trips out of one bait catching episode. Because catching bait's a lot of work, really is. I will offer an apology here at the outset to those of you who fish with artificial bait. The only thing you're going to get out of the rest of my presentation is a high level of satisfaction knowing how much frustration, work, and cost you are avoiding by using artificial bait.
That's why Joe was smiling.
I guess, yeah. For the rest of you that do have some interest in live bait, then I'll offer some
Captain Quarter sells bait.
pros. Yeah. Those are Arkansas shiners, and we just don't think they work as well as they'll.
They may not,
Yeah.
but if you wanna go fishing and you can't catch bait,
They
it
do.
works.
Yeah, they do. Let's start by adjusting expectations a little. In my opinion, there is probably no such thing as a non-commercial, long-term bait storage system that's trouble-free, low maintenance, consistently successful, and affordable. But perfection is usually not a realistic option for me anyway, so I felt comfortable proceeding. In the short term, you can achieve those things, but for longer term bait storage, things become considerably more challenging. Due to time limits tonight, now that Chad took so much time.
Sorry about that.
I'm going to comment very little on what I would consider the most important issue for both short and long-term bait storage, and that is water quality. Next slide, please. If you can remember the acronym TACCI, T-A-C-C-I, TACCI, and that's not a commentary on my attire tonight. This is not tacky, this is good t-shirt here. But the TACCI principles are T for water temperature, cool is better than hot, but the absolute temperature is less important than the rate of temperature change. If the change occurs slowly, either up or down, your live bait will tolerate that change much better. Much to my surprise, over the last couple of years of doing this, I've found that live bait can survive in 85-degree water if the temperature changes slowly, so they have an opportunity to adapt. And that also assumes that all the other things I talk about on water quality are good. Okay, T for temperature. A is for aeration, or oxygen content of the water. Lots of bubbles, especially lots of small bubbles, are important, and some water movement, that's essential. In my tank, which you'll see some pictures of in a minute, I use a 120 volt Alpine 2100 pump. That's 2,100 gallons per hour of throughput. I use a Danco aerator for the small bubbles, and it also creates some gentle circular movement around the tub. And then I also get lots and lots of bigger bubbles that come from the high volume of water draining through the filter bucket. C is for water chemistry. As I'm sure all of you add salt to your water, the fish, their urine creates ammonia, which is toxic, and if it gets enough of it, it'll kill them. If you use chlorinated water, which I encourage you not to, but if that's all you got, then you're going to need to put some kind of a neutralizer in your water to neutralize the ammonia, neutralize the chlorine. I use a product that CCAM makes. I get it on Amazon called Prime, and that neutralizes the ammonia, and I don't use chlorine, so it doesn't matter for that. Okay, next slide. The second C in our TACI principles, C is for water clarity. I have a very high volume filter. Whoops. Stay on clarity for now. I use a 5-gallon bucket with 1/2-inch holes in the bottom, filled 2/3 full of lava rock with all the little tiny holes in them, and then topped with 2 layers of this furnace filter cut in a circle, and then bags of activated charcoal. The furnace filter acts as a mechanical filter to filter out the scales and poop, and you need to take it out and flush it every 2 to 3 days at least. If you're gone for several days, or if you forget, it will eventually get so full of crap that the water will just go over the top of the bucket and could run your pump dry if that happens. The lava rock acts as a bacterial filter, assuming you get the good bacteria to grow on your lava rock. Sometimes that takes a few weeks to get that started. And I, for TACI, is incredible monitoring and attention. This is not a trouble-free operation. If you occasionally have dead bait, and you will, you know, I've never seen anything decompose as fast as an alewife. And if you don't get the dead bait out of there, they will decompose, they will foul the water, and I'm sure in the case of honeybees, you've heard of colony collapse. Well, if you don't get your dead bait out of your tank, you will have colony collapse of all your bait. So you gotta pay attention. But if you can master those 5 things, then you'll be successful. Now, for exactly how to master them, I'm going to refer you to what I think is the best source of detailed information about those principles. And that is a presentation by a guy named Keith Shannon from Tennessee on keeping your bait healthy. John is going to post his presentation on the Striper Club website, and if you're interested, I encourage you to take a look at it. Very good. My research on live bait storage had 2 dimensions. In the short term, you know, you got to catch the bait, and once you catch it, immediately put it in a tub of water. Next slide, I think. Slightly salted and slightly cooler than the regular water.
Question, right?
Yeah.
I have a bait cage right off the dock. I catch the bait, I dump it in there.
Yeah, I've seen people do that, and
It stays very nice.
I think it can work. However, the stress, what I found is the stress of being caught in a net with 50 other of your comrades wiggling around, bright lights shining on you. The alewives shed scales and poop under stress.
I've had them there till, usually catch them at night,
Yeah,
about 10, 11 o'clock.
yeah.
And in the morning, they're good.
Yeah.
The water's
And
cold
if you've
though.
got a,
I've held them as much as 2 days.
if you have a good filtering system and the right
Just
temperature,
the lake.
they probably would. However, I think they would last even better if you did an intermediate soak in the tub to
Wow.
let them shed scales and poop. But if it works for you the way you're doing it, then keep doing it
Up to
that
the
way.
house. Oh,
Yeah,
He's got them in a cage, and they're not enclosed, it's just a wire cage.
Yeah.
It's a bait tank in the lake.
In the lake.
Oh, okay. Anyway, after you get them in a tub, if you use a tub, then subsequently transfer them to your bait tank on your boat, or in my case, for longer term storage to the tank that I have on my dock. My motivation in terms of longer term storage, I was looking for something that I could keep alewives alive for 1 to 2 weeks. Now, initially, I tried making 2 types of submerged enclosures, and that didn't work for me. And if it works for somebody, more power to you, but I just could not get that approach to work.
Especially in the summertime.
Or other time, but especially in summer. I was inspired to try another option by something that 2 Striper Club members did, Michael Ward and Tyler Early, several years ago. And next slide, they came up with something that looks like this. And my understanding is they had pretty good luck with that. And I think their video is still on the club website somewhere.
How many gallons is that tank?
I don't know for sure, I guess around 250 to 300.
Is that yours or is
No,
that Tyler's?
That's Tyler
Okay.
and Mike's. In any event, what I ultimately came up with, next slide. What I ultimately came up with is a storage tank, and it's covered with plywood here, so you can't see the tank itself just now. But I've kept up to 75, maybe 80 large alewives that lasted for 5 weeks. I was flabbergasted.
You feed them?
I did. That was this June and July. Now, just so you know the whole story, that was preceded by approximately 2 years worth of experimenting, where I was darn lucky if I kept them for a week or 10 days. Yeah.
Did you get any fishing done while you were messing with minnows?
Yeah. Now and then. Anyway, once the temperature, the ambient air temperature is 85 plus degrees, then frankly all bets are off. Now, if you have access to a lot of ice, you can ice the water and that'll help, but
Is that your garage or your house?
believe me, it takes a lot of ice to lower the temperature of 250 to 300 gallons of water.
Was there a good temperature that worked better than others?
I would say the closer, it depends, but I'd say you can, sweet spot of 65 to 75. I had my least mortality when the water was in that range. But I could go up to 85 as long as it just was low gradual. And I would lose a few, but not many. Anyway, before you embark on building a long-term storage tank, there are 6 important behavioral essentials. One is you need to make a long-term commitment to live bait fishing. And if you're not sure that you're committed to live bait fishing in the long term, then don't bother doing this. You need to have some basic carpentry, plumbing, and electrical skills. Not advanced, basic. You need to have creative problem-solving skills because, believe me, you will have problems. You need to have a low need for immediate gratification. In other words, you need to have patience. to have a high
Run out of
tolerance
this.
for frustration and failure. But most importantly, you need the ability to learn from your failures if you want to make progress. And lastly, you need to be willing to make a commitment to babysitting this thing. Long-term bait storage is not trouble-free. Dead bait will foul the water, and as it decomposes, it will poison the other fish in your tank.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. So you said yours is 250 gallons?
It's rated. Let's go to the next slide, and you'll get a little bit of an idea.
The dock up.
Yeah, this is my son. I recruited him to help. What was your question, Chad?
When I, like, in my, and I'm saying little 50-gallon creek bank,
Mm-hmm.
all it takes is like 1 or 2 dead baits that stay in there a day,
Yeah.
and the whole thing's fouled up. It's cloudy water, it stinks. How many does it take to foul yours up?
Oh, probably half a dozen.
Okay, so I mean, guys, it's not many dead, I mean,
Yeah, not many.
yeah.
And so, I just gotta keep an eye on it.
You start with lake water or start with well water?
I'll get to that in a minute. There are some practical essentials, starting with location, space, and weight load. Ideally, you need or like to have a space on or near your boat dock that's heavily reinforced and at least 10 by 10. Remember, 300 gallons of water times 8.3 pounds per gallon is about 2,500 pounds. And you do not want your bait tank falling through your dock. So I was able to get some help from my son once when the water was real low, and he's 6'6", so he was able to help me. Go ahead, John, next. Create a additional space on our dock. We were lucky enough, the previous owners of our house had a houseboat, and so the length of the boat space was really long, and so I was able to basically carve out some space out of that for building an additional dock space. And next slide. I was lucky enough to have a lot of leftover 2x12s and 2x10s and 2x8s and 2x4s to build this extra space. Go ahead, next slide.
Did you get an AEP permit for that?
I didn't make the dock bigger.
It was on the same on the
It
road.
was
Same on the road.
There you go.
So that's where I put the dock. Let's see, I think there's one more picture maybe. Okay, the actual tank itself, in retrospect, I should have followed Tyler Early's advice and gotten a round, white, circular tank, but I couldn't find one. I looked all over, couldn't find one. And I was hot to make this, so I went to Tractor Supply and I bought a 300-gallon stock tank. It has worked really quite well. It's about 4 feet wide, 6 feet long, 25 inches tall or so. Before I put it inside the perimeter, I put in a Danko aerator and did a few other plumbing issues. Now, I suppose in an ideal world, if you had an air-conditioned and heated garage down by your boat, that'd be a great place.
Yeah.
Not many of us have that, and even if we did, I don't know that our spouses would be very happy with the smell of a bait tank and occasional dead bait in their garage. So this ended up on the dock, and I'm happy with the location. Next slide. Okay, here you can see the bait tank with some of the plumbing and in the enclosure. I used 2-inch insulation board, 4x8 sheets. That was probably the second most expensive thing that went in. I don't know that that was absolutely necessary, but I think it helps. You'll notice that the bait tank is kind of charcoal. Looks black there, but it's more a charcoal gray. That's bad, because guess what color it was? And, man, it was, with no contrast, it was hard to see. So, I used, the Flex Seal, it's advertised on TV. I used white Flex Seal on the bottom of the bait tank, which created enough contrast so I could see. And I used 1.25 PVC pipe that pulls the water here, takes it out, pump is over there, puts it up to the filter bucket on top. Next slide.
Are you still married?
You're a mad scientist.
Teresa drinks a lot.
Teresa thinks that this keeps me out of her hair. This is the pump, 120 volts, runs continuously. You never turn it off unless it's clogged with a dead fish. The PVC, it's really important, in my opinion, to use a friction fit in certain key locations rather than the solvent and glue, because I was pretty sure, since a lot of the things I do are trial and error, that I might have to reconfigure this or redo it, and I wanted to be able to pull apart some of those joints, so a lot of them are friction fit, not glue joints. And this pump, which I got on Amazon, I think it lists for around $200, and it's almost always on sale for somewhat less. It can either go in the tank, or it can go outside the tank. And I chose to put it outside, and that has worked reasonably well.
So if you put it in the tank, the motor's just gonna heat the water.
Yeah,
Right.
and in fact, the motor does add some heat to the water
It's all
also, just because of the friction as the impeller turns around. Now, that motor is going on 3 years, with essentially trouble-free operation, unless
Do you shut it down in the winter and winterize it?
I do unplug it in the winter because we're frequently not here in the winter. I don't, or I haven't yet winterized it.
So you don't drain it down to make sure it's all dry?
Yeah, I do drain. I mean, I try. I'm not sure if
Hasn't
it's
cracked yet.
completely, hasn't cracked yet, but I do drain it in the winter.
And how does that pump pull up with the salt water? Does it make the salt water the impeller and the seals?
Haven't had any trouble now. I put a lot of salt in here for 300 gallons of water. That's a lot of salt. And the only thing it has ruined are the metal fittings that I put my water thermometer on. It rusted through real fast, but the pump itself does not have a major problem.
How often do you change the water in the whole tank?
Depends how bad it gets.
Once a month?
No, unless I have a wholesale. Now, John, go to the next slide, please. There's a little bit closer view of the pump. Next slide. Next one. Okay, there was a picture of the filter bucket, if you can go back one.
With the lava rocks?
Lava rock, and then on top of the lava rock is the furnace filter, and then just a high volume of water through it. Next slide. And next slide. You can buy activated charcoal, price has really gone up, but you can still buy it. Pine Prime I get on Amazon, and then the filter you've seen here.
What brand is that charcoal?
Aquatech.
Aquatech.
I use Zeoline.
Yeah,
Same.
I'm sure it's identical, activated charcoal.
What's it do? What's the
It
function of
helps
it?
to clarify the water.
Okay.
And it deactivates the ammonia.
Yeah.
I think it has that effect as well.
You just put that in water and
Ionic
you put it.
exchange.
Well, the first time I just sprinkled it in the water,
So what I do,
but I subsequently have put it in bags.
so you know, on a regular bait tank, this is, what I do is similar to this, but on a much smaller scale on a 50-gallon bait tank. So it's got your filter, it's not a bucket, you know what I mean? You pull that thing out, it's about that wide, about that tall, whatever. I put the filter material in there, but then in the bottom of the filter basket, I take pantyhose. Joel, don't get excited. Take pantyhose and I put the carbon in the pantyhose and put it in there. So like right where the water's gonna come in the top, like his is, it's the filter is gonna trap the scales, the poop, all the big stuff. But then before that water exits the basket, it's got to go through, or in theory, it has to go through this carbon stuff that I keep encapsulated in pantyhose.
So how do you clean that?
So I just take a bucket,
Just rinse it out?
just rinse it out. Yeah, you do it every couple days or so.
And you're using zeolite,
Yeah,
which is what they use in
aquariums.
aquariums,
Yeah.
also hard water softeners.
Water treatment.
Water
Yes,
treatment,
yes.
So, you know, I have like a, I don't know, 50-gallon garbage can, and I stole my wife's pond pump, and I put it in just a pitcher with filter material and rocks and all that stuff. And it's a closed system, it doesn't suck water into the lake. Now, in the wintertime, I've got just a fish an aquarium thermometer, and I drop it in there and I keep the water temp, because it'll get cold, you know? Ice will form around this and that and everything else, but the water temp I can keep at 65 degrees. But it's a little bit of a guessing game, you know, it's like, okay, how cold it's gonna get, I'll turn the heat up a little bit.
Quarter turn.
Yeah, and I get in, and yeah, other than the summer months I'm not getting bait anyway,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
other than the summer months, and the summer months I will have had bait when it gets warm, I'll put, like Diet Coke, those 2-liter bottles, I've got the freezer full of them. I get to grief from my wife about that too, and I'll take them and rotate them through and keep the water cool. In the wintertime, the aquarium thermometer keeps the water temperature.
Yeah. We don't have pantyhose in our house anymore. We're wearing them a long time.
Yeah, I got some weird looks on with the Dollar General and all the pantyhose.
I use, I don't think it's silk, I think it's some kind of fine mesh bag.
Christmas time, I go,
And that works great unless they split open. And then you have these little granules of activated charcoal, and when they go through the pump, it sounds like your pump is explode, but it survives. From a financial standpoint, usually plan on this costing $1,000 or more, depending on, in total, depending on how many materials you already have on hand. And as I said, I was lucky enough to have a lot of 2x10s and 2x8s and other wood on
In the
hand.
initial dock space.
And the dock space, right. Now, I used an oblong tank, 300 gallons, Tractor Supply, $300, dark charcoal, bad. Now,
You can see the white bottom.
alewives, well, that's actually some PVC board I was experimenting with.
Told you the man
Alewives are
scientist.
not this color. Alewives are dark charcoal, but my camera flashed and made them brown. Next to the
Goldfish.
Next slide. So after I painted the bottom, sealed bottom, that made it really easy to see. However, I'm sure you all have little dip nets that you use in your tanks. if you try to catch these with a little dip net,
Spend all morning.
you will never make it out in the lake to go fishing, because you'll still be back trying to catch your bait out of the tank. Alewives are incredibly fast and agile, much more adept at avoiding a net than I am at catching them. So you also need to invest in a bigger net, but with fine mesh, with a long pole, so that you can just scoop, and 2 or 3 scoops, and you got all you need for fishing that day.
Looks like there's some gizzards in that. You keep gizzards too, long-term?
I experimented with that, and I was expecting the gizzards would terrorize the alewives,
They do.
and I didn't find that to be a problem.
Really?
But I made sure that the first time I went fishing, I took all the gizzards out and took them with me. So for a long-term basis, maybe they would have. I rarely fish with gizzards, even when I get them in the net.
But you also have a lot of room in there.
Yeah.
So when I put gizzards and alewives together in a smaller space,
Yeah.
they beat the fire out of it.
Boom, boom.
Yes.
That's right.
The gizzards don't live very
Again, location-wise, it's absolutely critical this will be in the shade. However, John, next slide. I found that in July, August, September, early October, sun angle came in, and I had to buy a sunshade. Otherwise, that extra sun just heated it up. Water. I have filled my tank with well water, which is not chlorinated. That worked fine. I filled my tank with lake water from our irrigation system. That worked fine. It wasn't as nice and crystal clear as the well water, but the filter cleaned that up after a while. The water thermometer is important. Ice jugs, we have a refrigerator freezer down on the dock, and so, like one of you said, you keep it full of jugs. I go through a lot of ice in the heat of the summer.
You know, since you spent all this money, they do make little, small 110-volt chillers. About a quarter horse, half horse, you can mount right on the other side of the wall.
Funny you would mention that, because I was gonna say that
Not
I was
expensive either.
told that there is a glut of chillers on the market from enthusiastic home brew makers who are no longer enthused about making home brew, sell off their chillers.
Really?
Yeah. So I've given some thought to putting a chiller on, but I just haven't gotten around to it, and I'm not sure I'm smart enough to do it, but I might. Because I know some smart people.
Bruce,
Yeah.
you take a dorm refrigerator, drill a hole on one side and a hole on the other side, and coil up as much copper pipe as you want, and pump that water right through it, and you don't need any ice.
Yeah. And it would probably get the water.
And it would be cheaper in the long run.
Yeah. There's another question, right, or comment?
You just put a thermostat on the
Um,
receptacle.
Anyway, the ultimate goal, obviously, of having bait, so you don't have to get up so early in the morning, every stinking morning you wanna go fishing. And, John, next slide, so that when you do go fishing, you have nice, crispy, live bait. Wrong way, other way.
Wow.
There.
There we go.
Oh,
So that you can go out and catch fish.
Do you feed your bait? I asked that
Oh,
earlier.
yeah, thank you.
Like what?
Yes, every 2 or 3 days, I add 10 to 12 gallons of lake water, which has their natural food, the zooplankton. And they've never complained about the meals. They've never said I've shorted them. So I don't give them any other food besides just those buckets of lake
I've
water.
taken tropical fish food and they readily eat it.
Alewives?
Alewives, just sprinkle the flakes and after 3 or 4 days, they get used to it.
Yeah.
And they're almost trained, as soon as I open the lid on my tank, they're all right there. Just like, and,
What goes in, of course,
Yes.
comes out.
yeah, but see, I'm in a big tank in the lake, in the water, so
Okay.
I don't do
Okay,
anything, I
don't
just
worry
open my,
about
I
that.
raise it up on, I got a big pulley system, raise it up,
Yep.
lift my lid, sprinkle it, and they just, it's like,
How about that?
it takes them a while, it takes them probably a week or so.
But you're a good teacher, so you train them.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and they eat it, and they seem to get, I can't say they grow, but they're fat and frisky and healthy and love to go fishing in the mornings.
Yeah. If only they knew what was in store for them.
My little granddaughter doesn't like it when I take them out of there.
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Yeah, so, for anybody in the room, any tips on eliminating or minimizing red nose on your gizzards?
That's ammonia.
That's what, that's ammonia?
Yeah.
Stress caused by ammonia.
And
If you don't put
and-
salt in your
and
water,
too long
you
in a
catch
tank.
them, that'll cause it.
What's that?
Good question.
If, when you take them out of the lake and don't put them in the salt,
Yeah.
like you do on the boat,
Yeah.
that'll cause it.
Yep,
Okay,
Yep.
you may not be using enough salt too.
I think that's probably my issue.
One cup for 10 gallons.
Right, and I've got a 30 gallon tank and I was using 2 handfuls, which is probably not
cup.
quite enough.
Probably a cup.
Yeah.
There was another question or
Well,
comment?
it got halfway answered here,
Okay, good enough.
because I was wondering, in this ecosystem you built to keep tanks, or the fish, is similar to the ones we used to build for saltwater. Did you ever use any meters to check the salinity of the water or anything like that?
I'm a pure amateur, and so that sounds real professional.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Bruce, let me ask you one question. Let me ask you one question. You talked about using well water.
Yeah.
Have you ever found that well water doesn't have enough oxygen in it?
Yes, if you don't turn your pump on,
Right.
oxygenate it.
Right.
So whenever I use well water instead of lake water, I make sure that I have my pump turned on for at least half an hour
Yes, okay,
before I put any bait in.
okay, I wondered that.
And,
Thank
you know, I've heard that there are some guides that, if you need oxygen, you know, with a nasal cannula, and there's a little pump that you connect to an oxygen tank for people who have difficulty breathing, I've heard there's some guides that are juicing their bait with pure oxygen in their
Wow.
bait tank.
We do that saltwater fishing all the time. Always have a big air stone and an oxygen tank.
Wow.
It's
And-
expensive to do, but it makes for great baits.
Yeah, I would think you'd have bait just jumping right out of it.
But you can kill them, the oxygen is toxic in too high a level.
Okay, so you gotta keep it
Correct.
moderation.
Correct.
That's what we keep saying, Walter, is moderation.
Yeah, yeah, no, it'll kill them.
Okay,
Bruce,
thank you.
and Bruce,